It's the home of Shakespeare, football, and mushy peas. It's a place of happy valleys and friends in the north. It's gritty, outlandish. It's a cracker. If it has a heartbeat, you'll find it here.
Gotta love that intro. Thanks again to Gary Bolter from Outcast Australia for constructing that to my brief. So back again to discuss more of Our Friends in the North, one of the best British television drama series ever made, in my opinion. And I've got my guest co-host coming in just a sec. We may or may not be joined by our third guest. I'm pretty sure that they're probably going to pop in at some point. Just checking my phone. But anyway, we're going to get into episodes 3, 4, and 5 tonight. Now, in case you didn't, 4, 5, and 6. In case you didn't see it, I interviewed Stuart Urban, who was the director of episodes 1, 2, and 3 on the show, and was heavily involved in the casting of the show and stuff like that. We talked about his career as a whole, but we talked about Our Friends in the North in great detail. You can find that on the industry interviews list, and hopefully he's going to come back on again at some point. It was great having him on. Without any further delay, it's the man from the darkest hour, and the clocks have just gone back, so it is indeed the dark hour.
Oh yeah, we're that goes back for us. Yeah, so we're actually closer than we usually are today. So
yeah, we're in British winter time now. So from this point onwards until about the middle of March, we don't actually see the sun again over here.
Well, that actually explains, because I thought, like, I noticed that the time changed on the on YouTube, but like the time was the same for me. I was like, oh, that's weird. So that must be because of the time change.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So how have you been? How's your week been?
It's not been bad. Just had a pretty good stream yesterday with Little Platoon and Jedi Brooks, and we did Shaun of the Dead. So I'm knee deep in British programming right now. Feeling a little under the weather. Got my Make America Great Britain Again mug full of my tea.
Make America Great Britain Again. Yeah, I like that. And that's perfect for this stream. Well, Dark Hour, thanks
I broke it out.
being on the best of British. I hope to get you on more of these so I can just keep immersing you in good quality British entertainment.
Oh yeah, for sure.
As time goes on. We've got Desert Phoenix and David Macy in the house. Thanks for popping in. As part of British TV, best of British TV, you have to one day feature on the late great Richard Kip Carpenter. Well, I'm doing specific shows, David, one-off TV drama films. So I'll be doing things like Alan Clark's Contact, stuff like that down the road, which my dear late friend Graham Fletcher Cook actually was playing one of the lead roles in that one-off drama film for BBC Two. But so I'm not going to be focusing on the individuals unless that's the name of a show that I'm not aware of, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But before we dive into tonight's subject matter, I did just want to do a little shout out to the late great actor Matthew Perry. It was the wee hours of the morning, and I was still up, as is my custom, to still be awake at sort of 2, 3 in the morning, beavering away at little work projects or whatever I might be doing. And it suddenly came up on my timeline, and I swear at first I thought it was a hoax, because that does happen sometimes, and they're taken down fairly quickly. But no, then, I Googled, and it was, of course, on a lot of official news networks. And, I mean, that's tragic. He's not much older than me, a few years older than me. An actor that had quite a tumultuous battle with Was it addiction painkiller? I think because
well, he had battles with
accident.
a few substances. I know he had alcohol problems too.
Right.
I think he may have done. There may have been some other stuff too that he did earlier in his career, like cocaine and stuff as well. So I think he had quite a bit of.
Well, he was in a very successful television show in the early
Yeah.
90s. I think it was the requirement of all actors in Los Angeles to
Pretty much
go
the
through.
requirement in the production industry.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. I mean, I have to say that I was a massive fan of Friends when it came out because I just thought it was very good writing, really good characters, good writing, and it was just a good fun half hour kind of, it would nearly always make you laugh. And of the 6 characters, he was my favorite because he was the one I related to the most. He was slightly nerdish, he was slightly awkward. He was the one who never got the girl, and he was living with the guy who always got the girl, which was fun. And it just was a really good show, and he really made that character. And I think the writers said that of the 6 characters, Chandler was the one they had the most trouble with. But then as soon as Perry came in and kind of inhabited the role, it was a lot easier for them to write his character. And I think you can see that. And he was the only one of the 6 actors that ever went in the writers' room and the writers' meetings and sort of gave some input, I think, on, don't think he wrote any episodes, but he certainly gave input on sort of direction of his character and maybe some of the lines for his character. So yeah, I mean, it's
it would make sense that they would bring him in to do that because he was very off the cuff. Like a lot of his lines were very like witty and quick, and you need to have the person really in tune with that to make that work. It's hard to write really witty, quick dialogue like that without input from the actor.
Him and Matt LeBlanc had amazing chemistry on screen, didn't they? Amazing. And Matt, I mean, my heart goes out to Matt because he must feel like he's lost his brother today, as close as you could get outside family. I mean, they were on that show for the best part of 10 years, I think, nearly.
Yeah, it was 10 seasons.
Yeah. So, and played best friends, and they just had that. 2 actors that didn't get on in real life could not have played that back and forth that they had. And all my favorite scenes that, when you think about our favorite scenes or favorite moments from Friends, they nearly all involve the 2 of them. And they, when they have the duck, and the thing that really annoyed me,
the duck and the chicken and the duck,
the duck and the chicken. Yeah. And there was a big debate about having to let them go. And they're always been kept in different parts of the house. And,
I remember when I think they built like some sort of I think they built a couch or something, or something. It was like, and then the duck was inside the furniture, and they had to break it to get it out. Yeah,
it got stuck in, and they kept hearing it. And first of all, they couldn't work out where it was. Well, one of the main news channels over here is Sky News, which I don't know if you get Sky in the States.
You can. It's not like that's one of the, if you pay for like an international package of channels,
right,
you can get that. Yeah.
So one of the things that annoyed me was they went. I mean, it's not that Friends has reached people of all ages, but the story had relatively just broken, and they were going. So we're cutting now to a Friends super fan, and this Friends super fan is 16 years old. It's like the 16-year-old kid. Oh yeah, I really like the show, and I watch it now even. And I just thought, where did they get this guy from? Is this like the son of the producer of the news, or like, couldn't you find one fan of Friends?
Like, someone in their 30s or 40s who watched the show
the show, because one of the reasons I like the show so much, and I don't want to go off topic too much, but was because I was the age of the characters when I was watching it. That show came out when I was in like my late 20s, and it's all about the friends that you meet when you're that age. And it says that a lot of the friends you meet when you're that age, you keep for a long time. And I think that's true. And, so I really related to a lot of even though it was predominantly a comedy, it did cover it slipped some serious topics under that quite cleverly. And, so you felt like you grew up with them. And I'm thinking like, come on, man. Some 16-year-old kid that's watched the show retroactively, That's a bit of appropriation of my culture, I'm afraid. What's
Yeah.
going on with that? But anyway, don't get me started on the latest South Park because
I haven't actually watched it yet. I have to check it out. I've
it's a
heard
lot
only
of
great
fun.
things. Yeah,
It's a lot of fun. Anyway, let's re-steer and get on to
away from Friends into Friends in the North,
but
if you will.
God rest his soul, Matthew Perry. Thank you so much, Matthew, for so many laughs. And you know, I wish he'd had an easier life, but I really did have a lot of laughs because of his performances. So I'm very grateful. Right, part 2 then. So have you watched the whole show now?
No, I didn't want to get too far ahead. I watched most of episode 7, but I didn't.
Right.
I wanted to stick pretty current to what we were talking.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Good. Okay, cool. Well, so you're kind of into the miners' strike and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
now.
I started getting into that and like but I was like, as I was watching it, I was like, this is going different directions. I want to stay current to what we were. So then I about halfway through the episode, I was like, let's hold off on this for now.
Well, we'll do a quick recap for anyone that hasn't watched the first episode or doesn't know what the show's about. In the unlikely event that that's the case, this is the booklet that comes with the anniversary DVD. The show's not available on Blu-ray. There is talk about them upscaling it and putting it in 16:9 ratio, which is what it was kind of originally shot on. It was shot on Super 16, so it could be put into that film format. It's just the money isn't there to do it. So it follows the lives of Nikki, Geordie, who's played by Daniel Craig, Tosca, who's played by Mark Strong, and Gina McKee's character is called, remind me, Mary.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't show that I wasn't sure if you were actually asking me if that was like rhetorical.
No, I'm just just for the audience. And Chris Eccleston at the beginning plays Nicky Hutchin. So these are 4 friends who live on the outskirts of Newcastle, working class Newcastle, which is a big northern sort of. It's almost like the capital of the north of England. It's a big city. It's a very vibrant city now, but in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was it was a city that was really devastated by the loss of its shipping industry, because this is where all the ships were built, a lot of them for World War II, and then some of the other stuff, and then of course a lot of that industry kind of declined. So there was massive unemployment, a lot of poverty, and a succession of governments promised changes that would benefit the people in the north, and of course, it was all bullshit. So with that political backdrop, we see the lives of these 4 characters. Geordie goes to London, ends up working for a Soho porn baron by the name of Benny, who's played by the wonderful Malcolm McDowell. Nikki works for a local politician, but effectively ends up working for a local builder, which is a bit of a bone of contention. Mary ends up becoming pregnant and moving into a damp-infested tenement in a block of flats, which has been built by said builder, who's profited as a result. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Stuart Urban, who was the director of the first 3 episodes, came in for an interview earlier this week with me, and we had a really great chat about all the preparation and work that was done. And they did have a couple of weeks of rehearsals with the actors, which was interesting to hear, because you don't get a lot of rehearsal time these days, because of course, TV companies don't like to pay for that stuff. So we're moving into episode 4. At the end of episode 3, we were Geordie had kind of had his heart broken. He'd fallen in love with Benny Barrett's girlfriend, not Benny Barrett's wife, who is spoken of, but we never see, or at least not until much closer to the end. Basically his bit on the side is also Geordie's bit on the side, and Geordie wanted to run away with her, but she's not really off that mindset, so he's kind of heartbroken. There's pressure on the police to clamp down on the porn barons in Soho, and it's starting to become a bit of a political issue. Nicky is kind of lost and not really sure. He's become disillusioned with working for Austin Donahue. It's the character that's played by Alan Armstrong. And so we go into episode 4, and it starts off with Nicky living with a group of what were called the anarchist movement back in the early 70s. And episode 4, I think, is 1974 or 72.
Somewhere in that range, yeah.
I think the episodes, they might be 72, 74, and 79, I think. But so this, basically, the next 3 episodes covers the decade of the 70s. So we've got Nicky living in the anarchists in what in London would be called a squat. Do you know what a squat is?
I would assume that the term squatter means that you're not paying to live somewhere. You're not like,
correct.
You don't own it.
Yeah.
So I would assume that a squat would be a place where a lot of people
Yeah.
live without actually paying rent.
Yeah, squatting a house was a bit of a thing back then, and of course there were a lot of empty and derelict houses. London still hadn't been fully rebuilt from the war in the 70s, and a lot of London completely different to how it looks now, much the same as any capital city, I imagine. So Nicky is living with a group of anarchists. He's got a new girlfriend called Helen. And the actress who plays her is particularly good, I have to say. And I think I can probably get a little image of her, because on Stuart Urban's website, he has a great show reel. And on his show reel, at the beginning of it, rather handily, there are several scenes that he directed from Our Friends in the North. So in fact, I'll just share that quickly and pop this up. I won't put the sound on because we don't want to get a ratio. I spent most of today, by the way, doing admin on my YouTube site, my YouTube channel, going back and kind of like trimming out all these kind of nonsense things that had been flagged that I had to correct,
Yeah, it's always terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually from episode 3. This is Geordie kind of getting ready for his new job. He's now working for Benny Barrett in Soho. This is the Soho set. It's not actually in London. This set was elsewhere. That is the police commissioner who bumps into Geordie, and I think I said to you before, he's played by Jeffrey, and his daughter was in my play that I just directed.
Yeah, you had mentioned that.
Yeah, fantastic actor. When Daniel Craig did this show, he'd only been out of drama school 3 years, and this was his first sort of major role. He had a couple of little parts before this. So this is Julia, who he's fallen in love with, who's Benny Barrett's mistress. This is when he asks her to come away with him. So this is the scene I wanted to get to, because I think this scene comes up in this episode. So Geordie and Nicky, Geordie comes back to Newcastle in episode 4, and they have a reunion.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rather powerful scene. And then Nicky's living with the anarchist, has a new girlfriend, and his girlfriend, who's called Helen, is in this scene. I'll just see if we can get a cut to her. There she is. Man, her character is well, I mean, the dinner scene comes a bit later, so I won't jump ahead, but her character is
she grates you pretty quickly.
Yeah, she comes across as one of these people who's come from a rich family, who jumps into a cause and makes it their own. But because of their own background and their safety net, there probably isn't a lot at risk for her.
Exactly.
We don't find out ultimately what happens to her, although there is something about her going to prison, but we'll come back to that. But that's self-entitled kind of rich person trying to make a political statement. And the other thing that happens fairly early on in the episode, when we meet the anarchists, they're all living with, everyone's got 70s long hair. One of them pulls out a machine gun.
Yeah, that's that becomes a point of emphasis throughout the episode.
Yeah, it's an Italian World War II machine pistol, I think, and the ones that were used by the Italian police for quite some time afterwards in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So, yeah, the anarchist movement, which was real, it did exist. They firebombed a few businesses that were sort of connected to things like apartheid or whatever. They shot up the South African embassy, stuff like that. Almost all of their efforts were completely ignored by the press, so that they weren't really given a voice. They were a very, very small group of people. They didn't really make much of an impact in British politics, but it's interesting that they're covered here. Anything you want to say about those three scenes before we jump onto Scotland Yard?
No, I think we actually spoke a little bit about this dinner scene on the last episode. So I think anybody who, I'm not sure. Was this in episode 4?
Did it come in episode 3?
It may have come in episode 3, actually. Now that I think about it.
Oh, you might
episode
be right.
3 and 4.
Yeah,
very similar.
It did. My apologies. So, no, you're right.
But
so
one thing I would like to say is just to answer Desert Phoenix in the chat. This is not like Friends at all. It is very much a drama with some hints of comedy from here and there. If you're looking for the British version of Friends, it's a show called Coupling, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Coupling
is really funny.
Yeah.
If you're looking for that's like the British version of Friends.
And I will be covering some British comedy stuff. My best of British is mainly going to focus on drama, but we've done some really good comedy dramas. In fact, the one that's currently on, I think it's on Netflix, with Freeman, the guy who was in the Hobbit movies.
I know.
Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman, yeah.
He's in a wonderful show at the minute about a dad, bringing up kids with his wife, and in a very, very modern contemporary setting, and all the issues that comes with, and kids with ADHD and over emotional issues. Any parent that's got a kid under the age of 14 would definitely relate to that show. That's a fantastic. I'm definitely going to do an episode about that. So no, this is a serious drama with a historical backdrop. I'm trying to think of something in America that's similar to this, but nothing comes to mind.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll think of something eventually. What to compare?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been stories, but nothing that's been. I can't think of an American show that's been set over 30 years.
We also don't tend to do miniseries over here as much.
No,
this has a start and end point that's really defined, whereas a lot of American television is more open-ended, and they want to keep it going as long as they can. It's definitely a different style than a lot of American programming. I'll probably think of something eventually.
Oliver Hollingdale is in the chat. British independent filmmaker with a fantasy movie that's now in post-production. Nice. Coming our way soon. When the film's finished, we'll be getting him on to talk about it. I can't wait to see the huge castle in the film. That's a running joke between me and him. So so this this was broadcast, guys, in 1996. 1 episode a week. Each episode is about 80 minutes. So feature film.
Yeah. It's basically like 9 movies in a row almost.
Yeah, almost. So when we've done a kind of, it's almost like a quick recap of Georgie is briefly back up north. Nikki is now in London living with anarchists. Tosca is kind of getting on with his business schemes, and he gets a new house in this episode. Tosca's in this episode a little bit, but not as much. A lot of it is to do with a lot of the focus of episode 4 is the corruption in Soho, and the first attempt at an investigation, an independent investigation, which was ordered. This all did really happen. So you've got this brilliant scene where at the end of the week, on Friday, at Scotland Yard, all the police are kind of like they're all arriving with bags and bags of booze.
Mhm.
And it's their end of the week piss up, and all the detectives, go to the private bar or they go to the Coppers pub. But everybody's got loads and loads of alcohol. And then there's a great scene, isn't there, where Daniel Craig actually is visiting because he's visiting to give money, which is a payoff, a bribe, to Detective John Solway.
Yeah. I love it. And then he like takes the money and he goes to count it, and he does it because they don't use like a counting machine. But he's like, it's kind of implied that he's been taking bribes for so long. He like counts it so fast. He's like, and he's almost as fast as like a money counting machine. And so like clearly he's been taking bribes for quite a while.
Yeah. He's like, that's a very good point. It's established that he's completely used to that. I don't know if any of those scenes are here. We'll just play that for a second. There's the wonderful Mark Strong. It's great. I love the way that they change the look of the characters.
That's probably the best aspect of the show, is that as the show goes on, nobody looks the same really. From episode 1 and 2, kind of they look similar, but then from like episode 3 on, they look different in every episode.
Yeah, they really do. It's extremely well done. So again, we establish a lot of things. As you said, the bribes are happening regularly. The newspapers are about to run a story on the corruption in Scotland Yard. So there's now pressure on the Met to do an independent investigation. And sorry, I got it wrong. Geordie and Nikki's reunion in this episode takes place in London. Nikki's come down to London because he's now living with the anarchists. So my apologies, that wasn't up north. And we have Nikki and Geordie. They go for a bar and have a drink, and there's that ongoing theme of Nikki's talking about trying to make change, trying to be part of making changes. And Geordie again, just thinking no, to get actively involved in politics, even as a one-man band, is a waste of your life. That's Geordie's view. And that view is then underscored by the fact that when they leave the pub, they come across a load of homeless tramps. And I recognize the way they dressed this location, and it was supposed to look like the Embankment, which back then had a bit of a cardboard city underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And the police turn up and they remove them by force, and there's a fire engine, and they hose them all down with water to get them out of there. Nikki is taking pictures, and he just decides to physically get involved, and he's like, Geordie, come on, and Geordie just backs off and leaves. And that's the difference between their two characters. Geordie is always doesn't attempt really to shape his own destiny. He's more about seeing what's around and then attaching.
He goes with the flow. Yeah, he goes with the flow.
He attaches
whatever comes along.
Yeah. That scene is quite well done. That did actually happen. Forcible removal of the homeless. And there was an area. We've got a massive IMAX cinema in Waterloo. But before that cinema was built, it's basically a what we call a subway, not the tube, an underpass. Where you go down and you can get to the other side of the road. It's a huge roundabout, and it was like a connection for like 6 different underpasses, and it had a massive cardboard city in the middle of it. I mean, there were like about 250 people living there at one point. So, of course, then that got designated for the site of the IMAX. So they were all forcibly removed. In the meanwhile, we have Danny Webb's character investigating the political connections between John Edwards and Austin Donahue, them using politics. So his character, Detective Conrad, has left the Dirty Squad because he didn't want to get involved in the corruption, and he's now sort of pursuing that kind of stuff with he's pursuing corruption. We're introduced to the character of Roy Johnson, who we've met earlier. He's the northern policeman who comes down to London to come in and run the inquiry. He's got a great line where he says, "We live such quiet lives up north compared to you," which is quite funny. And then we're also back in Newcastle. Tosca's got a new house. Mary has her women's group that's in the house discussing politics and things like that. And then we have that scene where Tosca refuses to give the pay rise to the kid who's helping him run his fruit and veg.
He has a great line too, where he says something along the lines like, "What do you think? Fruit grows on trees?"
Yeah,
it's like yes, it does grow on trees.
Yeah, that's good, and I think Mary convinces him to give the kid a rise in the end, and then they're actually offered the flats are supposed to have been fixed. That's not our friends in the north, so we'll leave that there.
Yeah, that was Rome, I believe.
That was Rome. Yeah, we'll cover that. We'll cover Rome in a different episode. So the flats are fixed, and Mary says, "Would you believe it? They've actually offered us our flat back at the old rates that we had, but they've got a house now, and she's not going back in there."
Yeah, they say something along the lines. I don't remember if it's her or him, but one of them says, "It's not much of a house that we live in, but it's a house."
Yeah,
so, and so which is the truth. It's like if you have the choice between a house where you're not, first, like, even take out all the problems that those flats had, sharing walls with people sucks.
Yeah,
it's like if you don't have to do that, you don't want to. So
yeah, she's in what they're in what's called a 2 up, 2 down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically 2 rooms downstairs, 2 rooms upstairs, plus a bathroom, toilet, and that we called those a 2 up, 2 down.
Makes sense.
So there's a number of scenes with my good friend Danny Webb here, where he talks to Detective Conrad, talks to Nikki Hutchins, Christopher Eccleston, and we can kind of see at that point how Nikki's almost been set up as to be like the fall guy by Austin Donahue and Edwards, unintentionally by Donahue perhaps, but definitely intentional by John Edwards, because when he's interviewing different people, he keeps being redirected to Nikki Hutchins. Oh, you want to speak to Nikki Hutchins? He dealt with that.
Yeah. He's definitely, he's been set up as a patsy, basically. And
then when they're talking about doing the investigation on the Soho Dirty Squad and the corruption, and Conrad is sort of he's kind of involved in that as well. There's that wonderful scene where I think it's Donald Sumter, Detective Harold Chappell's character, who's one of the senior guys who's involved in the corruption, says, "Why don't you speak to John Solway, get him involved? He's really keen." And of course, he's the main copper who's on the take. Yeah. So there's all of that. Now, Geordie, at this point, Geordie has to go away, doesn't he? He has to leave London.
Yes,
because his name keeps coming up, doesn't it, in the inquiry? Because he's a front man for Barrett.
Yeah.
And they realize he's the link. He's the one who's passing the money back and forth.
Yeah. Basically, and he ends up like essentially taking the fall for the whole thing as well. It's one of the running themes of this episode was that it was setting up people that you don't want to be the person who's necessarily the middleman, because you'll just end up taking the fall for the people who are really at fault.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a running theme here.
Yeah.
Not so much with Tosker and Mary, but with the other two.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, you don't want to be the expendable middleman. That's like basically what it is.
No, indeed. And yeah, I can see where that's going for Geordie's character. So ultimately, he kind of has to go away. So I think it's at that point that he relocates to the south coast somewhere. We don't know exactly where, but it's somewhere like Broadstairs or Hastings or somewhere like that. I don't think it's quite as salubrious as Brighton, which back then was kind of the south coast destination.
I remember seeing for some reason off the top, like it's standing out in my mind. He gets off of a bus and it says Albion, and I know that's like a location, right? Like Albion is a place, because I know there's like a football soccer team that was like something.
There's a football soccer team called West Bromwich Albion.
That's it. So
maybe... but there isn't. I don't think there's an Albion on Sea.
That's just, it just stands out in my mind for some reason.
Yeah, no. I was thinking about that. It was just like, is there an Albion on Sea, and I'm just not remembering it, or funnily enough, there is on the south coast, just along from Worthing.
Yeah.
There's a little area called Southwick, which has the Albion public house, I think a famous pub, and it's also got the Albion convenience store. So that might be a sort of a name of, it's an area called Shoreham, which is,
I'm just trying to look it up myself right now if they actually.
Yeah, that's west of Brighton, but the only other Albion place that's on the coast is the Albion cooling system, which is in Essex. I don't think he's supposed to be living in Westcliff-on-Sea in Essex. So he's probably gone to the south coast somewhere. It's not too specific on where it is. I think we have a couple of shots of Tosca walking along of Geordie walking along seafront.
Yeah, I was just trying to look it up. It doesn't actually say where he relocates to in the description.
So he ends up staying at a guest house on the south coast, where he meets Daphne, who works there. Daphne is the actress who plays Daphne. I don't know have you ever heard of a film called The Commitments?
No, never heard of it.
By Alan Parker.
No, never heard of it.
So The Commitments was quite a successful film that came out in, I want to say it came out around either 1990 or it might have been the end of the 80s. 1991. I wasn't far off. And that was a movie about a sort of an Irish band that's put together by a sort of entrepreneurial music producer, this kid effectively, and he wants to create this band. One of the lead cast of The Commitments, and this cast were largely unknown. There's a actress called, I think her name's Angelina something or other. She's the one with the big blonde hair in this photo. Okay. That's the same actress that plays Daphne in this episode of Our Friends in the North, and she's got a young daughter who Geordie bonds with. Geordie's, of all the characters, funny enough, Geordie is the one who bonds with children the easiest. He never has any kids of his own.
Yeah.
But in all the episodes, he bonds with children very quickly.
Which actually, when we get a little further, it actually becomes a detriment for several people, but that's in a later episode.
Yeah. But and I think the reason for that is he's always trying to, as an older, as he gets becomes an older adult, he's always trying to be the presence in a child's life that child might not have, or the opposite of the adult presence that he had.
Yeah,
which was a dad that constantly beat him up, and a mother that he barely knew, I think is the if I remember. So yeah, so that's the actress who plays Daphne. If you haven't seen The Commitments, by the way, and it's directed by Alan Parker. I'm sure you've heard of Alan Parker.
I've heard of Alan Parker. Yeah.
He directed Mississippi Burning. Angeline Ball is the actress concerned. There she is. So Yeah, I definitely recommend The Commitments for sure. That's not her in Our Friends in the North, but that's not too dissimilar looking
Yeah,
from
that
her.
and actually, yeah, I mean, that looks like one of the front shops that they would have had right there.
Yeah,
So,
I know, right?
like,
I think it's something different, but that's in a different film. She's a very talented actress. I like her. I think she's very good. 48 credits on IMDb. Definitely do check out The Commitments. That's a film that's well worth seeing. No idea what that's a trailer for. That's playing out on now. Anyway, getting back to the cast. So John Solway takes over the investigation effectively, which of course means that it doesn't go anywhere because he's investigating himself.
yeah,
Johnson, who has been brought in from outside the Met to investigate what's going on, he resigns effectively. He's played by the wonderful actor Tony Haygarth, seen here. I think sadly, yeah, no longer with us. But this is Tony Haygarth, who's the
really has that like detective cop look. Like,
yeah. I
like,
mean, yeah, he does. He's in uniform
mhm.
in Our
Yeah, and
Friends in
that's
the North.
he was in uniform almost the whole time, almost every scene he's in. I actually really enjoy the way that they handled the internal investigations,
Yeah,
because I don't know exactly what you guys call it there, but over here we call it internal affairs, IA.
yeah,
And often, like, when someone from IA shows up at that means stuff's gone really bad if they've
yeah.
gotten to that point. And that's kind of the sense you get. And like, people, if I recall correctly, this is when they start kind of convincing people to like essentially retire early.
Yeah, I think that comes more in episode 5,
Mhm.
which
It's
we'll
hard to
come on
tell
to.
because some of the whereas they do actually age up and like change the main character, sometimes the side characters pretty much look exactly the same, so the time frame is a little rough with them.
Yeah,
Like uh what is it? Eddie Wells like always looks exactly the same, and
yeah,
like a
yeah,
lot of the cops all look exactly the same. So it's like, I don't know if that was a stylistic choice or it was just a way to like save money on costumes or something. But the it's easier to tell where we are in the timeline with the main characters than it is with the side characters sometimes.
yeah, yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. Well, Tony Haygarth, who's a stage actor, veteran stage actor, fantastic actor. Yeah, he resigns effectively. The connection with him and the rest of the story is he's also best friends with Nikki's dad, who's played by
Yes.
Peter Vaughan from Our Friends in the North. So he basically resigns. The inquiry goes nowhere. It's effectively dead. This did happen in real life. The first attempt at investigating corruption within the Met was just completely forestalled from within. Officers wouldn't give they were blocked at every turn, basically. So the internal investigation of the Met, which, by the way, they hadn't had an internal investigation of the Met before up until this point, was effectively useless.
Yeah,
The next,
and that was one thing that as it was going on, they every time like they kind of get some headway on the investigation, evidence disappears or people are not being cooperative. And I don't remember the exact words, but it was between the two. It was the one that was put in charge of figuring it out first before Danny Webb, and then the guy Tony Haygarth's character Roy. Yeah,
yeah, he was
yeah,
yeah he was called Roy Johnson.
yeah. Like they're basically talking about how like it's essentially pointless, and then it has to be redone. Like
Yeah,
it's gone too up high up to the point where they can't possibly uh get it up there. It's like was it David Schofield's character is also part of that whole like when they go to investigate him every time he's like completely not even he doesn't cooperate at all with them. So
no, I mean he's the main person
yeah.
because they identify where the corruption is, but the
Mhm.
problem is it goes so high that it's they're powerless effectively to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so that's effectively where that's as far as the Soho storyline goes at the end of episode 4. The corruption inquiry is dead, and things are still going on as before. So Geordie, one of the things that happens with Geordie's storyline, Daniel Craig, is the thing with him meeting Daphne and everything is we kind of they kind of set up. Geordie has several chances for happiness in the show.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig's character, and they set that up as another one, and you think he's going to sort of like be, land back on his feet, and then he's brought back to London. I've got this in my notes that this happens in episode 4, and he's set up.
Yeah.
Basically he comes back and he finds his his flat is filled with pornographic material.
And they immediately knock on the door with a search warrant.
Yeah, so
literally as he gets home, it's like they almost like follow him up.
Yeah, and he's arrested immediately. So episode 4 is his storyline. Geordie's arrested. Then we kind of have an intervention on Nikki because Nikki's character returns to Newcastle and he takes the machine gun with him that was used in one of the attacks on one of the foreign embassies. This attack has not been reported. It was carried out at night. It was largely harmless. They just drove past in the car and machine gunned some windows. But nevertheless, and his mother finds it. And there's a great scene where he comes in and he's got his father there, played by the wonderful Peter Vaughan. His mother, played by Frida Dowie. And she's like, I'm going to church. When I come back, I want that out of the house.
Yeah.
And you've got David Bradley there, Eddie Wells' character. All a bit disappointed in you, Nikki. It is like a bit of
he like walks in and he's like whistling. He's like, and he's like, hey, what's up, everybody? Like, what's going on? It's very much an intervention.
And Mary's there, or then there's a scene with Mary.
Yeah.
And Nikki and Mary have that moment. I can't remember if this is when she's no, I don't. I think it's already happened that it was earlier in the episode. She said it's such a big mistake getting married to Tosca, but I think Nikki and Mary briefly have a kiss, and then Tosca arrives home, doesn't he?
No, they're just really close to each other. They don't actually.
They're really close. It's about to happen.
Yeah.
We feel like it's about to happen, and we by now, as the audience, we know these characters. We feel these characters are supposed to be together. So David Macy pointing out Tony Haygarth was a great loss. He was indeed a very big loss. Darth Plato, thank you for being here. There's a great ending to episode 4 where Tosca comes in and he's like, Patrick's died, and Patrick is Mary's younger brother who's disabled, and it finishes with the funeral of Patrick, and Tosca is presumably he's been a choir boy earlier in his life, and he's resuming that role, and he's singing the hymn.
Yeah,
and he's all cut up inside, but he's singing it out of tune as well because he can't sing in tune.
Which has been it's been a running thing is that he's not as good of a musician as he thinks he is. That was established.
Exactly. So episode 5 opens.
This is when it starts to like flip on its head, really.
Yeah.
It changes a lot really quickly because I think that episode 5 starts with right when
opens with a dream sequence.
Remind me.
Episode 5 opens with Geordie's dream sequence where Barrett's kind of like welcoming him as a son.
Yes, you're right.
And it's Geordie dreaming of his ideal life, that Barrett has fulfilled the father role that he's missing in his life. And I think, his girlfriend character is there. And then he pulls out a gun and he starts shooting everyone. And kills Benny Barrett because that's what he's dreaming of doing. And then he wakes up and he's in prison.
Yes, yeah. And I think he gets let out of prison shortly thereafter.
Yeah. We cut to some real footage of Prime Minister Edward Heath at this point, and episode 2, which I think is set in 76, I want to say. It's either 74 or 76.
74.
This was a year of strikes. So, like, the bin men went on strike. So there were piles of rubbish building up everywhere that were not being taken away by the refuse company. It was the beginning of the miners' strikes. We had railway strikes. Everybody was going on strike. Conrad, we have a scene briefly with Danny Webb, Detective Conrad. He's now in pursuit of Austin Donahue. He's got a clear mindset of how this corruption took place between these local politicians and builders, and money out of councils and things like that. And then we cut to Soho being raided, and there's a conference, isn't there? And this new detective comes in, and he's introduced as Detective Jellicoe. This is based on a real guy. I think I have the name of the real guy in here. But the actor that plays Jellicoe, they cast him really well. I haven't seen him in loads of things, but I have seen him in a few things, and he's got this really stern, quite frightening face. And they call a press conference, and it's like, and the press is sort of, all the reporters are there, and you can tell that there's a new sheriff in town, and things are going to change where Soho and the corruption is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reporters says, well, when are these changes going to be occurring exactly? And his new senior detective, the one that's been working with Danny Webb's character, looks at his watch and goes, I think about now. And then we cut to Soho being raided, and all the shops are being raided. New detectives coming in. One of them played by Chris Walker, who Stuart Urban cast, who was also in An Ungentlemanly Act, great actor. And they're all kind of shutting down the shops and arresting everyone. And John Solway sees them all celebrating in the bar, celebrating their success, their victory, and turns to Chapel and says, look at them, you know, why can't things just go back to the way they were? And Detective Chapel looks at him and goes, it's all over, John.
Yeah.
Like,
and this is the thing I was referring to before, that they kind of go, like, convince themselves to be like, well, let's just retire early, basically. What's up, Brownie?
Yeah, could see Mr. B. He's probably going online soon, I think.
Sunday, I think he goes on in about a half hour.
Yeah, got a show coming up. Yeah, I mean, this is the end of the corruption, the beginning of the end of the corruption in Soho. Chapel is shown as retiring, so that's Donald Sumpter's character, who again I've met. Donald's a friend of mine, lovely man. I might try and get him on, see if I can get him to come on. I've still got his email somewhere, and he's been to see a couple of my plays, which is very, very nice of him. And I remember talking to Donald not long before he got cast in Game of Thrones, and I was trying to get a project made, and I couldn't get the funding for it. And he was saying, I don't understand why good quality writing doesn't get funding these days. He said that the roles I'm getting offered and things in a lot of the writing is rubbish. And then it was not long after that he got cast in Game of Thrones, and I sent him a message and I said Game of Thrones is pretty good, right? I mean, we're talking early seasons here.
Yeah, you're talking about like the first few seasons.
We're talking about when it was well written and everything had meaning. And and he actually hadn't. I don't think he knew how big the books were, so he wasn't sure if it was going to go past the first season. And of course, the show does really well. But he's great as Harold Chapel. I have seen Donald Sumpter in Hamlet, and he played Hamlet's dad, the ghost.
Yeah.
And I think some other roles, and he was fantastic. And I was right in the front row, so he was like 3 feet from me, when he was acting. It was great to see him on stage. He really knows his stuff. So so the corruption's all over for the Soho Dirty Squad. The new guys that are coming in are celebrating their victory. Yeah, and as you say, people start retiring. The cops start retiring. Then we cut to up north. No. Sorry. Before we do that, there's a few other things that happen. Oh, my apologies.
Well, they do. Like I said, they do let Jordy out of prison.
Yeah,
and
he
tries to go back to his old apartment. That's one thing.
Yeah, and there's one of the other girls living there.
One of the other dancers
who recognizes him and lets him stay, which turns out to be a bit of a mistake on her part.
Yeah, because he has basically like a mental breakdown.
Yeah, because he's suffering from PTSD, really.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is after the Soho stuff, there's a really lovely scene between Nicky and his mum. Mm-hmm. Just the two of them, which is really beautiful. I'm trying to remember the exact stuff that they talked about, but I remember the scene. And Nicky comes round to Mary and Tosca's, and there's that moment where Tosca's not there. They have a hug in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. That's another minute when, and then Eddie and Felix are talking, and they're talking about how the young have no interest in politics, but Eddie asks Felix to help him run.
Yes.
And then we cut to Spain, and in Spain we've got Benny, Barrett, and Chappell, Donald Sumter, who were just on holiday together in Cyprus, and Chappell's telling him to stay away and not come back. Now, this is a true story. These two characters upon whom these people are based, Humphreys is the real name of Barrett's character. Humphreys did go on holiday and was joined by this senior detective on holiday with his wife. I mean, talk about poor decision making on the part of the detective. And when it all came out, when the story broke, that was front page news that they were on holiday together. You can actually find those front page stories online. So we've got that shot of them being abroad somewhere. I don't actually know where that was shot, but it does look like they did film that abroad. There's certainly palm trees and Spanish architecture. I think it was probably filmed in Spain, but the actual holiday took place in Cyprus. So then we've got Chappell retiring, and his retirement party, and hasn't he got a scene where he says, just either don't get me a bloody barometer or
I think it's a clock that they give him or something. It's like,
no,
it's a barometer maybe.
He either says, I don't want a bloody clock, get me a barometer.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they do get him one of those big barometers that goes on the wall. We used to have one of those. They're supposed to tell the weather, but I don't really know what they do. They just look pretty.
I actually have like an old school what is it? Like a Da Vinci style one, like the where it's like a bubble, and it's like
it's kind of like shaped like a violin, right? It's almost like
a little bit. Yeah. I have like an old school one, but yeah, the one that they give him is like a brass one you would put on like a wall.
Yeah, no, we had a really old one like that. I don't know if they actually ever had any kind of function. Don't ever recall anyone in our family going, "Hey, should we check the barometer to see what the weather's going to be like?"
Yeah, it does. It just like if you happen to notice it, it's one of those things you're like, "Oh, it's probably going to rain because the moisture level's really high."
Because
that's pretty much it.
That thing's gone a little bit to the left, or yeah. Well, so that you got the retirement scene. There's an important little scene between Detective Chappell and Solway, where Solway says, if anything happens, you're going to go with me. As in, if I go down, you're going down too. So that's quite important because that does come to pass. And then we cut back up to Newcastle with Felix and Eddie, and Eddie doesn't win.
He doesn't win the nomination.
Doesn't win the nomination to stand for the local Labour Party. So Felix encourages him to stand as an independent, and Nicky offers to help, but his offer of help is refused.
Yeah,
by Eddie. Why do you think
he doesn't? I think he doesn't want, because he knows that Nikki was involved with the anarchist movement, and they get him dragged through the mud. Like, oh, your political, your campaign manager was an anarchist. Like how do we know that you're not? So I think that was the impression I got there.
And also, he was involved with Austin Donahue, and the scandal of all that is also now.
There's a lot of baggage that would come along with that. And I remember him saying, because he's running at this point, Nikki's running like a local basically a micro newspaper. I think he has like 200 people that are that he delivers it to or something like that.
Yeah.
And he says like we want to put your name in as like the for official like officially endorse you. All 200 people that we deliver to or something like that.
My 200 subscribers.
Yeah.
I think he actually does use the word subscribers.
Yeah.
At one point. That's what old subscribers meant before YouTube. It was people that had a newspaper delivered to their house,
that's actually, and there was a call, like, I believe in episode 4, we didn't mention this, but one of the things they were doing in that when they were squatting was printing the newspapers.
Yeah, they've got
like the old school like hand crank newspaper.
Yeah, like the French Resistance would use.
Yes,
in World War II, and that's all. So at this point, Nikki's character is very much alone. He's been unable. He's still not quite sure where he fits. He doesn't have a permanent romance in his life. I think I don't know if the scene has happened when he talks. Doesn't he make a phone call about? I think it might be in this episode. He makes a phone call about going back to London, and he's on the phone to Helen. And isn't this episode where they hear the bang on the door and the police come in and all the anarchists in London are arrested?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, he doesn't have that option either. And they're all arrested. Lucky for him that he wasn't there and not really involved at the sharp end.
And they blame him, though. They blame him that they think that basically he tipped them off because he's been followed multiple times by people to the house. So like he's being too obvious. So they essentially they get arrested, but I don't think there like any charges are like held. So like they get out, if I recall correctly. And it's like
I think they do go down for a few years, but I don't. We're not really.
I'm backwards. They had kicked him out because he had been followed a few times, and people found him. Specifically Jordy had come to the house looking for him, and it was like if it was easy enough for someone with essentially no means of tracking them down was able to follow him there, because he even says like this is my old mate, from back home, and they're like. They essentially that's when they show the machine gun and stuff that they have. So
yeah, that's right. So then we get a big. What happens next is and it's all starting to come out about Edwards, and there's a line mentioned that people are starting to go to prison, and charges are going to be put on Austin Donahue. He hasn't been arrested yet, but we know he's going to get arrested. Geordie gets out of prison. He goes back to his old flat. He connects with the girl. The girl lets him stay there. Then we've got a big chunk of time of the episode, rightly so, dedicated to not only Tosca and Mary's relationship, but also about Tosca's relationship with his son, Anthony, their first kid. And they've also got a little girl as well, I think, by this point.
Bernadette.
Yeah. And I mean, she's only like 1 or something, but you've got a scene where Tosca's trying to teach his kid to play the drums, and he's like, "You're just not trying, man. Now, come on, it's like this. 1,
He's
2.
basically trying to like vicariously live through his son. Like he wants his son to do what he couldn't, essentially.
Yeah, become a rock star. And his son doesn't want to play the drums, and it's making the gap between father and son. He's pushing him away without realizing it. And then we have that, and then we have a scene where Tosca tells Mary he's looking at property developing, and I love this line. He says, "You married a fool, but you've got a wise man for a husband."
Yeah,
great line. That's brilliant writing, and that this became a big thing in the 70s that the council, in order to get some money back, what they would do is they started selling off some of their housing stock to their long-term tenants. So they would give their long-term tenants the opportunity to buy and own their own homes. And that might be the scene where Tosca takes. No, I think it's later that he gets involved more in purchasing of housing. But he states here that's what he wants to do. The scene where he visits the housing estate, I think, is later. And the kid writes like wanker on the back of his car or something, which is quite funny. But then the other important thing that happens here is about Tosca and Mary's relationship. We realize that they're no longer connecting on an emotional level. It's actually quite tragic because Tosca's really trying, but the chasm between them is just too big. And then there's that awful scene where, you know, like Tosca and Mary have sex and Mary just lies there and then waits for him to finish. It's all very clinical.
Yeah.
And then she just, Tosca wants
because it's something along the lines of actually I think that was in episode 4.
No, that's in this episode.
But yeah, he says something about like you should be giving it she mentions like that he should like maybe like they're possibly paying for it, and she's like, well, I should be getting it for free from you. And it's like, so basically she stops doing her work. She's getting more and more involved with local politics.
Yeah.
And so she stops, she pulls back from that for a little bit. They go do that. And then she gets up and is like, well, I still have work to do, so I'm going back outside.
Yeah, she's getting dressed and he wants like a cuddle. He wants like an emotional connection after. And he's like, what are you doing? And she says, I've still got work to do. And she just gets on and carries on with her day. So it almost becomes like transactional. Geordie has that we can see that Geordie's got mental health issues. He's drinking a lot. And it's also established that not one person came to see him while he was in prison. Conrad visits Seabrook. So there's that quite tense scene there. And then where Seabrook goes, it's not a question of dates. It's not a question of dates.
Yeah.
And he's trying to distance himself from any involvement in Edward's system building. And again, Lord Seabrook is played by the man who Julian Fellows, who produced Downton Abbey, produced Downton Abbey, and is now pretty much, we don't see him act very often, but he's a good actor. Been in a number of things. And it's agreed that they're going to arrest Austin Donahue. So Felix and Eddie then are doing their voting campaign. There's a smear campaign by the Labour Party against Eddie.
Saying he has a drinking problem.
Saying he had a drinking problem and he killed his wife.
Yeah, and
in a drunk driving accident. And it's never quite, I don't think we ever quite find out what happened to his wife, but they're clearly skewing exactly what happened.
Yeah. And I know that the basically then Mary essentially like distances herself from the Labour Party at that point.
Yeah.
She basically walks in and is like, what the hell is this? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good scene.
Yeah, that's actually probably that's one of the more powerful scenes in the show, where so she's dedicated a lot of time, and like she even has a point where, you know, she says that she personally supports Edward and Eddie and Eddie Wells, and but because of her position, she has to support the official candidate.
Yeah, because she demands to know, doesn't she, who was behind it, the smear campaign.
Yeah, she like runs it and they find out exactly who it is, like immediately, essentially. And I forget exactly what she says, but she basically like tells him like, you know, where he can stick it, essentially. And then now she's gonna go actually unofficially help.
It's
Eddie
Connor.
Wells.
It's Connor, isn't it? The same guy that kind of gave the go ahead for the flats.
Yes, yeah.
To be
and she kind of like then like unofficially starts helping Eddie Wells.
That's right.
In a non-official capacity, but she's really like she's kind of undermining the Labour Party itself for his independent run.
There's a great shot of Gina McKee in the Forsyth saga, which was made about 6 years after Our Friends in the North, with Damian Lewis, who of course would have shot Band of Brothers just before this.
I remember it was right around this part. I had messaged you and you never said anything, and I was like, "What is with British people's teeth?" So like, because like she's pretty until she smiles. It's very strange.
I don't know. She's smiling there. She still looks good.
Well, like something about her teeth just like threw me off. I was like, what's going on here?
I don't know. The reason I've put a picture of Gina McKee up is not to examine her teeth, but what I wanted to say is I think she's a massively underrated actress.
Yeah, she's like the only one of the main characters who hasn't like didn't really break out, I guess.
Well, I think it's unfair to say that because there are different definitions of that. She's not on the A-list radar. You know, Daniel Craig has been cast as James Bond. How high can you go?
Yeah.
No one knew that Band of
Eccleston
Brothers was going to be the big international success that it was at the time, especially because it opened the same week as 9/11. But, you know, as it happened, it was the appetite. I could have told them it was going to be that. I knew the appetite for true World War II done right it's still there now, you know. Yeah, so you never know, but good actors, regardless of their level of fame, like Gina, never stop working.
No, yeah, I've looked at her like IMDb, and like, you know, she's been in a
impressive.
lot of stuff. It's just mostly British stuff. It's like mostly she's been successful. She just didn't break into that like international level.
I think also, you know, you'll get to a certain level of success, and there'll be that kind of, so do you want to come and live in LA and do American shows and do American films? And some people will be like, yeah, I've been to Los Angeles. No, thank you. I'm quite happy to, you know, I want to be able to buy good fish and chips and a good Indian curry. And I don't feel Los Angeles is going to give me those things. It's going to give me a tan.
No, you get a decent burrito in LA, but that's the other stuff probably not as much.
But I mean, yeah, she's extremely, I can tell you now, she's extremely respected in the industry. And I know my own casting director had her on shortlists for all kinds of projects. People would always be, can we get Gina McKee? And, you know, casting director will go to the agent, is your client available? And 70% of the time in Gina McKee's case, the answer would be, no, she's not. I'm afraid she's fully booked for the next 6 months. So she's an actor that's quite hard to get because she's always working, and she's done a huge amount of stage work. I've seen her in a play at the Hammersmith Theatre, I think it was, and she was fantastic. So yeah, I'd work with her in a heartbeat. British drama show, pun intended in the line there. She's really good in this.
And I've seen pictures of her recently. She aged very well. Like she didn't she pretty much, she looks almost like the same as she, like almost all three of the other actors. So like Mark Strong actually looked like, because when he embraced the baldness, he looks great. But like,
yeah, he's kind of become a non-silver fox, if that makes sense.
But like Eccleston doesn't look really as like, you know, that his look hasn't really gone well, and Daniel Craig kind of looks the same, but he's lost a lot of that like youthfulness. She pretty much looks just slightly older, but everything's exactly the same as it was during this show. So yeah, she's
So continuing with episode 5, let's punch through to that and jump on to 6 so we can keep under the 2-hour mark. So the next thing that happens is, after the smear campaign, is Nicky comes back to talk to Eddie. I think he has that scene where he admits he feels very lost. And I think that's when they reconcile a bit, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
Nicky's now living in the Willow Lane flats. He's actually living in the flat that's been vacated by Mary and Tosca, which is,
and they're surprised by that, and he says why, and they ask him why, and he says, well, I was given the choice and I decided to take that one.
Yeah,
I think that's partially because he feels responsible for a lot of what happened to them.
Yeah,
so he feels he needs to live their life, like the negative part of their life now.
And they're in a terrible state, and like a lot of them are boarded up.
Yeah,
I think,
they were fixed up, but they weren't fixed.
and I think Geordie ends up. Does Geordie end up living with him at one point, or is that later? Maybe that's later.
That's in episode 6.
That's later. 6. Okay, we'll come back to that.
Geordie ends up with he's kind of embraced that he wants to kill
Benny.
Yeah, Benny. And so Benny like Barrett, he had his breakdown at his old apartment. I don't remember the character's name off the top of my head. The dancer / prostitute that he was with. Essentially like tells him to like let it go, but he can't. He's essentially perpetually stuck in this thought process that Benny ruined his life, and he really did. Benny did ruin his life. He sold him up the river.
Yeah,
and so he gets a gun, or he still has the gun from like a while back or something.
And it's a proper knackered pistol.
Yeah, it's like an old school pistol, and
he's like checking that it's going to work and sort of making sure it's not going to jam. But
he finds out that Benny has returned to England, which was ill-advised. They even like told him not to return, but he like just decided he had to. He has too many businesses he's running. He needs to go see what's going on. And it's like he's with, I'm guessing is that his wife that he was with, or just another mistress?
Yeah, no, it's his wife. In the with the real pornographer, whose name I believe was John Humphreys, and actually I've got a great photo of him, so I'll see if I can get it. No, John Humphreys had a wife.
Well, they've already established that Benny has a wife too, because she commissioned the painting that became a plot point in episode 3. But yeah, I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be his wife or if that was supposed to be another mistress, but they come back from Spain.
Yeah.
And now Geordie is aware of it. He gets word somehow. I don't remember exactly how he gets word, but he knows that he's back. And the police, obviously. So it kind of becomes like this, like, who's going to get to Benny first kind of moment.
Yeah.
Because he's basically out to dinner at.
There you go. This is the real Benny Barrett.
Looks nothing like Malcolm McDowell.
No, I mean, no, indeed. But that's it's James Humphreys, not John Humphreys, and his wife. And James Humphreys there's a great Wikipedia page all about him. And Ken Jury is the character that Harold Chappell is based on, head of the flying squad, and his wife on holiday to Cyprus and Beirut. You know, back in the days when you could go on holiday to Beirut.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you know, he was alive up until 2003. You can see here, look, Benny Barrett, played by Malcolm McDowell, based on Humphreys. But he was. Even after Our Friends in the North, they were done for running brothels in London, and him and his wife both went to prison. Him for 12 months and her for 8. Yeah, so it's almost like a chase sequence, isn't it? He's trying to find him. Oh, you've just missed him. And
he's basically closing in on him, and the police are also doing that. They're looking for his car because he's a very distinct car. It's a white top convertible. I forget exactly what it was, but I remember they keep mentioning that they're looking for this specific car.
Yeah.
And when they're closing in, he gets to the restaurant that Benny is at, and they won't let him in because he's not wearing a tie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he goes up to that group of yuppie-looking young conservative boys.
Yeah, remember, this is all happening while the election's going on.
Yeah,
and they're like out celebrating because it's like they're Tories. I know that
they're Tories or conservatives. So
yeah,
the equivalent of Republicans in the United States.
And he's like, first he tries like buying ties off people, and he walks up and he says, "Hey, can I have your tie?" And the one we'll call him the main Tory, is like, "Oh, this looks like a guy who would have voted for the other side, doesn't it, boys?"
Yeah,
he looks like one of those late ones. And now, which is funny because Geordie is completely apathetic to politics. He doesn't care which side wins. He probably never voted in his life. And so they're giving him shit and is like, "Oh, well, if you tell me that, and I believe you, that you didn't vote labor, I'll give you my tie. And he just goes, screw this, and pulls the gun out and just like, just give me the tie. It's like he's holding up a guy for his tie. It's a fantastic little sequence.
Yeah, no, that is really well done.
That was probably my favorite sequence in the show up to this point, because it's got that tension of like, and he gets the tie, he's putting it on, and he's walking towards the restaurant, and he sees Benny and his wife coming out. Yeah. And he pulls the gun out, and that's when the police roll up. And
the police roll up and get to Benny first, and you can just
I got excited for that scene because I really like that scene. So
yeah, and you can see like Daniel Craig is like crushed.
Yeah, because he wanted to kill him. He just.
This is one of the headlines: the police chief and the porn king from the real deal. Was it wise for Commander Jury of the Yard to go on holiday with this old lag? Old lag being criminal? Possibly not. I would suggest possibly not. And that I think that might be the. There's a couple of other things that happen actually. Chapel retires and gets his barometer. That happens. That's intercut with that scene. In Newcastle, the vote with Eddie is so close with the Labour that a recount is demanded.
Yeah.
And then Eddie wins by just like about 200 votes or something.
Yeah, it's like barely. They have to.
Yeah.
And there was also something about like they thought that there might have been some fudging of numbers or something with the I don't remember exactly what they say, but it's something along the lines of like this count wasn't accurate, and we don't like it was definitely like essentially they were trying to like keep the independent candidate out of
they were trying to fiddle it, but it didn't work. And
but once you get a recount going and it's like under official review of like even higher powers, you can't do that. Like there's no way you can do that stuff. Like you can't just forget.
Just ask America about that with the last election. Couple of other really crucial things here, and we'll talk about the end of the episode. So you've got the recount going on. Then you've got a scene with Jellicoe, and he's looking at all the evidence because now Benny's been arrested, and Benny had all that his insurance policy, which is video footage of Solway with brasses and all the rest of it, as we say in England. He goes, well, I can see 6 arrests to be made immediately. And then his second in command advises him that one of them is actually teaching at Hendon. So in other words, he's teaching the young coppers.
Yeah.
So he's like, arrest him discreetly, the rest of them very publicly.
Yeah.
And then the saddest part of this storyline for me is then when they talk about Conrad, Danny Webb's character, and he's like, he was barely in it, sir. He got out of it at the beginning, and Jellicoe's no sympathy for him. He says he knew about it. He's as guilty as the rest of them. Mm-hmm. So then you've got a montage scene of them all being arrested, including them like banging on Solway's door, and Solway's there with his wife and kids, and he's kind of playing with his wedding ring. And you can see the look on his face. He just knows his life is finished. Chapel tries to cover himself with a coat, and one of the reporters pulls it off his head. That actually happened. That's a true event. Yeah, and then he was photographed as he was being arrested because that guy tried to hide his face. And then, of course, unfortunately, just as Ron is getting close to the Seagrove and the top of the level of corruption, and he's pushing to make the next move, they come in, and that might also be the reason why they arrested him as well. So I felt really bad for Danny Webb's character, and that's the end of the Soho narrative. Then we get to the final episode of the final scene of episode 5, which is Geordie has now travelled back up to Newcastle because there's nothing left for him in Soho, and he arrives just in time for Eddie's victory party.
Yeah,
and it's kind of it's almost like a positive ending for a lot of the characters. Nikki has reconnected with Geordie, and also with Eddie. We know that Tosca and Mary are done in terms of their relationship, but they're going to stay together for the benefit of their kids. Everyone's kind of reached a sort of end point, and then it kind of freezes with Geordie, and as Geordie arrives, and it cuts to this upbeat music. And when I watched this show, there wasn't a lot of big PR about it, no internet back then. I thought that's it. I've seen the last one, and so when there was another one the following week, I was like, oh, I thought, and you said you had the same reaction, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, you had already told me that. I knew it was 9 episodes going in, so it was but I could see 100% the end there, because it was almost like they all ended up back together.
Yeah,
which is usually a good spot to end something. Geordie has kind of, I mean, he's not in a good spot, but he's back with his friends. The one thing he does say, I think, is like, "Do you have any food here?" or something like that. I think that's the actual line. It's like they're like, "Oh,
goes, any chance of something to eat?" Like,
yeah, because he doesn't care about the politics stuff. It's been consistent with his character all along, and he rolls up, and then this is actually like kind of important for the setup for the next episode too, because one of probably the person who's most excited to see him is Tosker. Like he's just like they've kept reconnecting throughout the whole show. But yeah, it definitely had the feel of a, like, things are turning around, and it's going to be better from here on out. And you kind of, we'll get to it obviously because we're at episode 6. Episode 6 kind of feels like that too, where it could be an end as well. And but there's definitely a an ending feel to it. There's upbeat. There's some triumph. There's still some tragedy, but it's triumphant. Things are looking good. Some of the bad guys have gotten their comeuppance for the most part. There's everything here. If they would have ended it right here, it would have been fine. 5 parts.
And this is the original stage play would have ended around here. This is, I mean, episode 5 is 76. Mm-hmm. The original stage play ended with the 79 election and with Thatcher getting into power, the Conservatives getting back into power. But I mean, it does feel like that, but it's the midpoint. It's actually the midpoint of the story. It's the halfway mark, effectively, and then we go into episode 6, which is all set in 79, and we open with a fantastic scene, which is a disco.
Yes, I like
Tosca and Geordie are out clubbing, and they're on the pool, and Tosca's in the toilet doing the comb over, and I think that probably is actually Mark Strong's real hair back then. And he's trying to make it look like he's not losing his hair, and that they're in their 70s threads, and they go back in, and they're they manage to pull some girls, because it's established that Geordie's now also living in the Willow Lane flat, so he's got somewhere that him and Tosca can go with women, and they pull a couple of girls, and and then Geordie's lost the keys, so he's got to go and see Nikki, who's in a flat next door, to get the keys off of him. Nikki's with a.
I love their back and forth when they're in the club is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good
because they're sitting there. He's complaining about his hair falling out, and his marriage falling apart, and how they're like kind of like intertwined problems. And I think Geordie goes, well, if you had to pick, 2 women in here for us to go after, essentially, which ones did you pick? And they kind of do like a pan and scan.
Yeah.
And like they both land on the same group, and then at the same time, like the same 2 women, and they're just like definitely, and then they just go for it. It's very like
they just go for it and go straight up. Talk. They haven't lost their confidence.
No.
No, I really like that scene. And then the girls later say, "Do you mind if we swap over, Tosca?"
That was a great.
My friend's got a thing about baldy men.
Yes, that's a great line, and he's like, "I don't really care."
That's we also establish in the morning, when the girls have gone and all the rest of it, that Geordie is now dealing drugs,
Yes.
and that the cops are still corrupt, and a detective arrives for their payoff. So that's established. Tosca goes home, and it's also established then that his kids hate him. He's also just missed an important event for his daughters. Didn't his daughter have like some sort of recital or something?
Yes, yeah, and that she's really upset about it. And Tosker's kind of weird in this sense. He clearly cares about his kids, but I don't think he's really understands how to be a father. That's his big problem.
Well, he has a scene, doesn't he, where this is where we really see him break. He has a scene where he breaks down. Mark Strong's brilliant in this scene.
Yeah.
And he says, he just starts crying, and he says, I've failed at everything. I let you down. I failed at the marriage. I failed at my business. And Mary, who by now they no longer have that emotional connection, she just gets up and she walks out. And I got to tell you, this is a bit personal, but in a past relationship, I had that moment in my life where I was in a really bad place and I broke down. But the relationship I was in was at such a point where my then partner was not going to give me any support back. And it was awful. I mean, it was awful for both of us to be in that place, you know. And I really, when I watched it again, I really related to that scene, and I was like, oh man, that's taking me right back there. You know, it's.
I think everybody's had like a moment like that where they needed somebody, and the person who was physically closest wasn't the one for that moment. You know, sometimes some people might like try to be like, oh well, they're there. You know, sorry that happened to you, but like she doesn't even attempt that. She's just up and gone. And
yeah, I felt Mary was a bit harsh in that.
It's weird because I kind of feel like both of them are both in the right and the wrong sometimes. It's like they kind of pass off on who's in the right and wrong, depending on the situation. It's really neither of their faults. But at the same time, it's both of their faults. They've just been in a failing marriage for a long time. And they even say it multiple times throughout this episode that they've known about this not going well. They've tried to fix it a couple of times. It's just not going, and it was destined to fail from the very start of this relationship.
Yeah, unfortunately. So then after that, we have a scene with Geordie and Nikki. They learn there's a couple of really important things that happen here. So Geordie and Nikki have a sort of a meetup. I think it takes place in a pub, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
And Nikki's like reading out a story from a newspaper, and Geordie learns that Barrett has indeed gone to prison. And one of the people who testified against him was Julia, the former lover of Barrett, Geordie. And Geordie's like made up to hear that, and he's like, yeah. And then Nikki carries on reading the story.
I think it was his own story, wasn't it? Wasn't it like one that he did the
I think he
maybe because he's become basically an investigative journalist.
Yeah, he's an investigative journalist and a photographer now of some note by this point. But he goes on to read that, and I forgot about this from when I watched the show the previous 5th or 6th time, that Julia was murdered. Suicided. She was Epstein, found dead from the bottom of her apartment block. And of course, Geordie's devastated because up to then, she's the only woman he's loved, because he says in that scene, I love you, but I shouldn't, because he knows that she doesn't quite feel the same way, and he's just going to get hurt. But he's devastated. That's a powerful moment. It's pretty hard on him. Then we cut to Anthony, Tosca's son, who I think he gets his hands on some alcohol and then goes into
he's not I don't remember if he gets his hands on the alcohol or if he gets it. He has a connection with Geordie, he's like, you know, Uncle Geordie, like the one that, you know, lets him do the cool stuff that the parents won't let him do. And it's kind of like his because Anthony is really like disgusted by his home life. He's young though, so he doesn't understand that he's disgusted by home life, but he hates
Yeah,
his
he's
father.
about in this episode. I think he's sort of about 14.
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah,
And he's disgusted with his home life. He hates his father. He loves his, like, he's really close to his mother, but I think that there's some resentment there too, that she hasn't tried to fix things as best she can. So he goes to be with Uncle Jordy. And when he gets there, Jordy's not there because he's off doing his drug deal thing or whatever. And he gets the alcohol and he finds the gun, the same gun
that's
that
right. Yeah. He's running around with a gun, isn't he?
that he was gonna use to kill Benny. And
That's right.
he's kind of just waving it around, and that's when the cops roll up.
Yeah, because I think he accidentally fires a shot as well, doesn't he?
No, I don't think he fires a shot. I think it's just because he has the music blasting exceptionally loud, so they're probably called in on like they were looking for they were looking for Jordy, I think. But they hear the music playing exceptionally. They know somebody's in the apartment, so they kick the door in, and then he holds the gun up to the police, and they all kind of like, they tell him to drop it, he drops it, and then
yeah,
I get a little confused after that, because then like the next scene he's like running through a garden or something. I don't really understand that, but
no. So the garden that he's running through that he starts smashing up is the allotment that is, he knows there's a family connection there, and the family connection is that allotment is actually owned by the detective who went to investigate the Soho Dirty Squad, Tony
Gotcha.
Haygarth's character.
Okay.
There's a little arc with Anthony. I guess we can talk about it now, so we don't jump around too much. And his arc in this episode is we see him out of control because he's got no connection with his parents. He destroys the allotments. He's got no focus. And then he's forced to meet with Tony Haygarth's character Jim, who's in hospital because he's had a heart attack. And we'll come back to that in a minute about how that comes about. And that scene with him and the kid is really well done. I think it's sort of Tony Haygarth kind of tries to guide him a bit.
Yeah, because he basically tells him, like, look, I'm not going to press charges. You're not actually in trouble.
Yeah,
you should be. He's like, you should be. I should do all these things, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And he basically tells him, like, his punishment is that he has to like sit there and talk to him about his life and explain like why you are the way you are. Like, what's
Roy Johnson is the name of that character. Sorry, not Jim. Roy Johnson.
Yeah, it's like, but that's like essentially like where it goes. It's like, the only thing because he doesn't really care that the damage is there. Like, he can deal with that. So it's more that he wants to try and use this as an opportunity to fix.
Yeah, and that's probably later. Anthony becomes a policeman, and that's probably the scene that makes that happen. I think in his life, because he's given advice by a policeman. In the next episode, we see Anthony is a member of the local constabulary. In between the scenes, cutting with Anthony's storyline up to the point where he goes to the hospital, we have the Labour Party. We cut to a shot of the local Labour Party, and they are divided as ever in terms of how they're going to deal with the Willow Lane flats and various other things. And it sounds like ultimately the ratepayers are going to end up paying to either fix them or demolish them. And I think there's other issues. So Eddie is sort of not, he got his seat, but he's ineffective.
He hasn't been able to do much with it.
No.
Which is pretty common for independent politicians. Usually it is, especially on the lower levels. I know you guys have the House of Commons, House of Lords as your
well, he's run as an independent Labour candidate, not backed by the party, but because he won, he's now still a Labour representative.
But like a lot of times, like independent candidates still get kind of ostracized because it's like you went against the. And I'm assuming he's in the House of Commons. I think that's what he's running for, I'm guessing.
No. I mean, once you get a seat, you get to go to the House and you can present arguments on behalf of your constituents. That's kind of
but it's like whether or not the rest of them take it seriously is
whether he has
to them.
He's still kind of a bit ostracized, and the Labour council they can't agree on the price of toffee. So we then pick up on Geordie's storyline, and he's obviously gone back to London because he goes to Barrett's office because Barrett is now out of jail.
Yes,
and he confronts Barrett over Julia, and there's that horrible scene where Malcolm McDowell is kind of saying, "Oh yeah, heard she came to a sticky end. Well, that's what happens when you live in those high-rise apartment blocks, isn't it? Sometimes you can take a nasty fall." And I mean, it's clearly implied that he or forces known to him had her murdered.
Yeah, Geordie essentially has a breakdown there of why would you it's the only woman I ever loved. Why would you,
and I mean Malcolm McDowell's character's completely unsympathetic, doesn't really.
No, I'm trying to remember exactly what he says, but it essentially breaks down to it really doesn't matter. She didn't actually love you anyway. There's a million of her. It's a lot of the same stuff that he had already kind of said. Just now, it's really final. It's there's not any. There's no room for argument anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole kind of women are rubbish, Geordie.
Yeah, which is what he did earlier. Same concept.
Again, I have to say, I do think it's one of Malcolm McDowell's best performances.
Oh no, I agree 100%.
Yeah,
he definitely a great. If a performance can make you kind of forget about previous performances, in this case, I'm not thinking about everybody knows him from A Clockwork Orange. That's always the thing he will always be associated with. But I'm not thinking about A Clockwork Orange when I'm watching this, which means he's doing a fantastic job. Yeah,
funnily enough, I'm not a fan of that movie. And
I've never been the biggest fan either. I understand why. I could see why people like it, but
so can I. But it's I don't get anything from it personally, other than nightmares. Another important point that comes up here is that Geordie then goes to speak to the police because, of course, inquiries have happened and stuff. Not only does Geordie go to speak to the police, but Roy Johnson also comes back to speak to the inquiry to give his evidence about his previous attempts at the inquiry. And it's clear that although, heads rolled, you learn that Chappell is already out of prison. That's Donald Sumter's character, and is a rich man. So clearly had money put away and did all right. John Solway will be out in 2.5 years, so he's not going to be in for very long either. And I think the point sort of Roy Johnson is making is it's all going to start all over again. It hasn't gone far enough, and he's waiting to speak to them, and they keep him waiting, and that's when he has, he goes to talk to them, and then he has that heart attack, which is how he ends up in hospital with Anthony later. So
it's one thing about talking about this show is the way that it's hard because it does jump around a lot. And it was some of the times we've been talking about it is hard to discuss because there are 9 plot lines going on.
Did you find that difficult to follow?
No, I don't find it difficult to follow. I think it's hard to discuss sometimes. This story, you want to talk about it in a linear fashion, but it doesn't really work that way. So it's each scene kind of jumps from story to story. So you get, but they always kind of come together at the end of maybe not every episode, but the stories do eventually converge. Some of them at least. And so talking about one, you get ahead of yourself on the other ones. It is a difficult show to actually have those kind of discussions, which we kind of had a little bit of that early in the 4th episode, because the 4th episode is very much like that, where it jumps around. It's almost like it's very similar to the 1st episode in that regard, where it's doing a lot of setup for what's going to happen in episodes 5 and 6.
Yeah, I suppose the other main storyline of episode 6 is Nikki decides to stand for Labour because
Yes.
Eddie's, I don't think, is going to stand again.
Yeah, he's. They mentioned that he's getting a little too old for it. Basically, he's been in and out of politics. You know, I don't. They imply that he looks the same age the whole time, but you know, like you figure that he was already like one of the grizzled veterans in the '60s, and you're approaching the '80s now. So you're talking like he's in his like 70s. He's not going to really want to do it anymore.
So Nikki decides to run, and then he has a press conference, and none of the press. It's a bit of a setup. None of the press want to ask him about the issues. They all ask him about his past associations with various things.
Yeah.
They try to. It's a smear campaign, basically. Mary and Tosca break up for good.
Well, that's because he meets that other woman, Elaine.
Yeah.
Who, at first, she asks him if he has a wife and all that, and he's like, no. And then it's like, oh, well, we're separated. We're going through a divorce. And then that's like news to her. Like, she's like, oh, well, I was unaware of that. Like, because Elaine goes to visit her.
Yeah.
And talk about it. And like, and
it's very scene.
It's very awkward, and both actresses do a very good job of capturing that awkwardness, because like Elaine's character, I don't know the actress's name, but
I do, and I've met her more than once, and she came to see my play about the Hillsborough football disaster, and she's in the film Hillsborough, which encouraged me to write that play.
Nice.
She is Tracy Wilkinson, and she's a fantastic actress.
Yes, yeah.
Quite a petite woman in real life, but you know,
she did seem quite on the small side. She was very short compared to Mark Strong.
Yeah, but as are most people. But
how tall is he? I don't even know.
He's pretty tall. He's a pretty tall guy. But no, she's a tour de force of an actress. I mean, I am going to do
pretty tall too.
So. I'm going to do the Hillsborough film, which it'd be great to get you on for that. And she's in that. She's in that, as is Christopher Eccleston.
Nice. We'll talk about that.
A friend of mine, Annabelle Apsian, is in that, and she's a phenomenal actress as well. But Tracy Wilkinson I think, is still quite underrated, and she does work. She's always working. But this was one of her first big roles. Because I love the scene where she's introduced, because I think Tosca's out clubbing with Geordie again, and
it's very similar to the first scene. It's almost identical, actually.
And he just goes, "See that woman over there? I'm going to marry her," and he does. I kind of like that about Tosca. He kind of like, yeah, I'm going to do that, and he goes all out.
Well, that plays in. I don't know if you remember the thing I said in the last episode. He really, like, when he sees something, he kind of just likes deer in headlights. He's just like, blinders on, and he does that all the time.
Yeah.
And this is another example. In this case, I mean, I don't know if it's going to work. I haven't gotten to episode 8 and 9 yet, but it seems like he's making the correct choice here, because like, especially when like there's a later scene where it shows that they're both very strange people that get each other when they're in like the hotel together, and they're like pretending to be aliens.
Have you seen Carnival Row?
I have not.
Yeah, do you know what? I haven't watched that yet, and I quite fancy the show. Tracy Wilkinson's in 9 episodes of that.
Oh, okay. So maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, if people want to see something else.
But back to this, like it. They both capture the awkwardness of that scene. So the scene, for those who haven't seen it, is Tosca's kind of been playing this like he wants a divorce, doesn't want to admit that he wants a divorce, all that stuff. And then Elaine, he's met her, he's in a relationship with her. She's accepting of the fact that he's in a broken marriage, and she wants him to get out of it. She's not 100%. She doesn't have all of the information, but she knows that she wants to be with this guy. Elaine goes to meet with Mary and essentially says, like, hey, this is the situation. I know that you're getting a divorce. And then Mary's like, oh, well, I wasn't, but I guess I am now. And it was, like he's afraid of like, hurting the kids, but really I think it's also he's afraid of like losing a lot of his money, and it's a very, very good scene because the way it's played, Elaine is basically coming in almost a robotic. She comes in like very like, well, this is how it is, and this is what it is, and I'm sorry, but it's like, and like Elaine is emotional, but like confused. It's such a great awkward.
Yeah,
exchange.
yeah. No, yeah. Gina McKee and Tracy Wilkinson play that. That scene is very clear in my head.
That was definitely in one of my top scenes in this show.
Yeah. I think then we're also introduced to Claudia Seabrook, who is the daughter of Lord Seabrook that we've met earlier, Julian Fellowes' character. And she's one of the actors who, I think the actor who's kind of her number two. And I think he's the guy who's financing her campaign. So to clarify who she is, she's running for the Conservative seat against Nikki Hutchins. So Larry Lamb is a great actor. You'll know the guy. I'll pop his headshot up. And he was in one of the movies about. I think he was in Buster, actually, which is the Phil Collins film about the Great Train Robbery.
I haven't seen that one. So.
It's worth seeing. I mean, it's a film that proves that Phil Collins is a pretty decent actor for one thing. I mean, Larry Lamb's been around for a long time, but he's a really, really good actor. And he was also in one of there's been a couple of movies about the Hatton Garden diamond robberies. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a robbery that took place, and it turned out that the people that did it were almost all of them were like over 70.
Oh, okay.
But this is Larry Lamb. So do you remember his character in Our Friends in the North? He's younger, obviously, in the show. He's the one who is in charge of the Masons.
Yes.
Tosca joins the Masons, and Tosca becomes a bit enamored with him because of the business connections he can make. And
I
think
remember
you have
that
the Masons in America.
Yeah, we have the Freemasons. Yeah,
and you kind of had like the Elks Club and
Elks Club, Freemasons.
Yeah,
we have a lot of these like social business club kind of things.
Yeah, because it's all about handshakes under the table. You do me a favor, I'll do, all of that kind of stuff. And first time I ever heard of the Elks Club was because of Tom Hanks's film Bachelor Party, where they all get in the lift with the Elks Club members. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember Bachelor Party. Yeah, I haven't seen that in a very long time, but I do recall that. Yeah,
that's a good movie, man. That was
like with Tom Hanks was like every movie he put out for a while, no matter how obscure, it was just really good for about,
he did
15 years.
He was a comedy actor. That was his first like leading role in a studio big film. And
when it comes to comedy with Tom Hanks, probably my favorite is Money Pit. When they buy the house, and they have to fix. Every time they go to fix it up, it just keeps getting worse.
That's with Shelley Long.
Yes,
and you got the great sequence where like the toaster blows up and it goes along the wire. Something else blows up. Something else blows up. The toilet explodes. It's propelled out the window into a different part of the house. And
yeah.
No, that's a good movie. Very well. The gags in that are very well done. The Bachelor Party double billed in the UK with Revenge of the Nerds. And I lied about my age to go and see those because they were both 18. So that was
Revenge of the Nerds is one of the more underrated comedies.
It's a great film. We'll have to cover that at some point.
I would 100% cover Revenge of the Nerds. Maybe I'll try to do that on my channel or something.
Yeah, man. Well, we could do a Bachelor Party Revenge of the Nerds double bill. Cover them both. So I think Mary and Nikki now they start getting close together. Geordie is a bit of a mess because the cop that he was dealing with and paying off has been paid off. There's a smear campaign against Hutchinson that's
it's mostly around his ties.
They say he supports the IRA.
Yeah, the IRA and all that stuff. Yeah,
because Claudia Seabrook has got this awful sleazy little man that works for her, who does all her underhanded
Even
shit.
though, and it's actually against her wishes too. She doesn't want to win that way, but
Yeah,
he wants her to win by any means necessary. I think she fires him. I think actually,
she does fire him, and
but the
he
damage is already done. It's
yeah. I mean, he's played by his character's called Colin Butler. He's played by a fantastic British actor who's also, I think he's an acting coach now, called Peter Lee Wilson. And he's another actor that I'm going to try and get on the channel at some point. This is him now.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah,
I can see the aged upness there, but
yeah, but I think he's aged quite well.
I'm saying age. When I say aged up, I don't necessarily mean he looks bad. I'm just saying I can see that he's older now. Like,
yeah.
definitely.
No, of course, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, his character is wonderfully sleazy. Again, the little supporting roles in this film, in this series are so well cast.
That's always important. That's the thing you'll hear in any of my reviews. I often will dedicate a section to like the miscellaneous actors, the ones that you might not necessarily know them household names, or even the character might not even have a name.
Yeah.
And this is one of those characters that would kind of fall into that category of my, where I will always say, like, if people are doing, if you got people that are doing their job well, and they're taking it seriously on that level, you're going to have a good product, because it's easy for the person who's the top bill, making the most money, having the most screen time. It's easy for that person to be like, yeah, I'm going to take it seriously. This is it. It's if you have a director or producers, all that stuff that can get those minor actors to buy in, you have a good crew on your hands, top to bottom.
Yeah. So there's just a couple of other things that happen in this episode, and I agree with what you said on casting 100%. That's so true. I think John, what's his name, the director of the guy who directed the Wild Geese movie, John McLaglen, American director, directed a lot of westerns. I think he said always cast the guts of your film correctly. The guts of the cast are what make a film work. As in all the people that are doing the supporting roles, make sure they're really good. Nikki gets a phone message and he cries. I'm trying to remember what that's about. That's in my notes.
I think if I recall correctly, it's that they're going to demolish the Willowbrook Flats.
That's it. Yeah.
And he basically, that was his thing he was running to do. That was really his stance, was to try and get that taken care of. And he drops out of the race because he doesn't have any reason to run anymore. He would have just been running for vanity at that point. And that's really not who he is anymore. Like, it may have been him like 10 years prior. He might have kept in, but now he's actually he understands what he's trying to do now. And by his goal being accomplished already, he doesn't need to go any further. So essentially he backs out and lets Claudia Seabrook have the seat.
And then, and the Willow Lane flats demolished, and they demolished some flats for real.
Yes, you mentioned that. I thought and when you said that, I was like 100%. It looks exactly like it. Real. Like.
And Anthony is the Tosca's son, is the guy who pushes the plunger. At
least on one of them, because they demolish all of them. He does for the first one, then they kind of demolish them.
And there was a real block of flats that was going down. I'm not quite sure where they were, you know what, I meant to ask Stuart that, but he probably wouldn't have known, because that would have taken place there were two big chunks of filming, and that would have been in the second block, which he wasn't involved in any case. But yeah, that's quite a powerful moment. And then we kind of got two scenes left, which is Nikki and Mary. It's her birthday. They nearly meet. Nikki confesses he missed her, and I think isn't that the scene where that's the night where they then end up in bed? Is that?
No. You're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah, no, they miss each other. They nearly. There's another moment, and it's another miss, isn't it?
It's another near miss. So basically, Nikki says, like, "Hey, for lack of better, I don't know exactly his words, but it's like, hey, we keep doing this thing where it's like, we could have been together, we weren't together, now we could be together now." and she essentially tells him it's not time, and it's because
That's
she has
right.
2 young kids that she
Yeah.
can't, she has too many responsibilities. It's not the correct time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
left there holding the bag, so to say.
Yeah.
He understands though; he gets it.
No, yeah, and yeah, it's not their it's not their moment.
Basically, I think what my feeling is that she doesn't want to come out of a broken relationship and start a relationship with immediately, because she knows it'll just end up broken because she's doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I felt. It's like she's not coming from the same place as he is. He's coming from a place of longing for an extended period of time. She's coming out of of this, and now it's going to be, she's trying to rebuild herself.
Yeah. And I think he's trying to sort of fill a void.
Mhm. Well, they would both be filling a void at that
Yeah.
point, and unfortunately, that would not be the point to start.
And then we sort of cut to Tosca and Elaine in bed, which is actually quite a touching.
That's the one I mentioned earlier. Yeah, it's a very strange
And
scene,
she calls him Terry, and that's the
Yes.
first time anyone's ever called him Terry.
She had actually mentioned that earlier during that other scene too, when she says to Mary, she goes, "Oh, Terry wants a divorce," and Mary goes,
Terry,
Like,
yeah,
because he hates, up to this point, he's always hated his name. That's why he goes by Tosker.
Yeah. I think,
and that's when they're kind of weird. They're doing like all the weird noises and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, which kind of shows that they have this strange but cute bond.
Connection.
That,
Yeah,
that
they have like
couples
it
develop that
almost,
really love each
honestly,
other.
it almost felt to me like I don't exactly know where it was going, but it almost felt like 2 Trekkies meeting each other.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't, like, that's the best way I could say it. Like 2 people who have a very similar like sense of humor and style and all this stuff. They finally, because that was the thing, is Mary and Tosker had a physical attraction early on, but they didn't really have anything in common. And these 2 clearly have.
There. Yeah.
And like I would say, like Elaine, if you put the 2 of them next to each other, like Mary is the more attractive woman conventionally, but Elaine, with that connection, she kind of has more of like emotional attractiveness.
Yeah, and she's also got a fire in her as well, and I like that about her character. Now, I haven't got any other notes for episode 6. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that episode?
No, I will say that overall, the 4th episode, like I said, kind of was a harder one to get through. It seems like that it's moving in thirds, which would make sense for this kind of narrative. The first episode of the first 3 was rough, but second and third episode really good. 4th episode, which is the first episode of the second trifecta, so to say, a little bit rougher to get through, a lot of setup, but then 5th and 6th episode very good. And I'm kind of getting that sense with the 7th episode as well. There's a lot of setup, talking about like the stuff that's coming up with all the strikes and stuff. And then I have a feeling that I'm going to have that same feeling of 7, 8, and 9 has that bam, bam. It's a very, there's a flow to it.
Episode 7's got a pretty, I don't know if I want to, I don't want to ruin it.
It's fine. You don't have to. I didn't finish it yet, so you don't gotta.
No. I mean, if you haven't got to what I would call the action sequence with the police,
yeah, probably
and the miners,
not. I think that's probably what's coming up. But
yeah, and that's based on something that really happened, and it's pretty interesting to watch. So we're now at the end of episode 6. Where are you on the IMDb rating out of 10 on Our Friends in the North?
I'm still probably in the same range, in that like 8-ish range. Yeah, 8. Sometimes it dips, sometimes it goes up, but so I'm kind of averaging it out. Like, if I had to go episode by episode, I'm kind of averaging it out as I go along. But yeah, it's definitely like, the only thing that I would say, and because like a couple of people I've told about this, I've been doing this with you, and like, I'm like, you have to understand British like styles, like British style of filming.
I think you've got to also remember it was shot in 96.
Yeah, and that's who you have to be able to remove certain things, and like, because like some people will be like, oh well, like, how are you connecting with it so much? I'm like, you gotta, you have to basically remove a lot of stuff and put yourself in the situation. And I feel like if you can do that with this show, and kind of connect with each character individually, Because like each one of them, it's not the hardest thing to latch on to these characters. Like, you know, maybe from episode to episode you might not be able to, but at some point one of them is going to go through something that
resonates with you.
Resonates. That's the word I'm looking for. Resonates.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all. Like, you know, maybe for, let's say, episode 4, for the sake of argument, but you're not connecting with Christopher Eccleston. But you are connecting with Mark Strong, and then like by episode 6, it flip flops or whatever. You know, it's like it's gonna, and I think that's a sign of great writing, is that you're able to connect with these 4 characters and others along the way as well, but the 4 main ones that are distinctly different from one another. Each one has a very different approach to the world, a very different outlook of the world, and if you can connect with 4 people like that throughout a show, you have a pretty damn good product on your hand.
Well, we're going to do the final episode soon. Now, we haven't set a date for that yet. Do you know when's good for you?
I mean, I could do it next Saturday if you need.
Okay. So let me just double check in my diary. I think I can do next Saturday as things stand.
Oh, if we have to back it up, we have to back it up. You know, not a big deal.
No, because I had a dinner this Saturday, and I know you had a stream. So next Saturday's the 4th. I potentially can do that. I could also do Sunday, the 5th of November.
That Sunday, I am completely booked for the whole day.
Okay, well, shall we go with 9 p.m. on the 4th?
So that'd be 4 p.m. for me. So yeah, that should work.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
And if I have to reschedule, we'll do that. So we're doing this live online, so everyone knows when it's happening.
Yeah, everyone knows our schedule now. So. But I do not have a episode of the Uninspired Hour or so next week. So yeah, Saturday is open.
All right. So Our Friends Part 3, we'll do that. We may or may not have our it'd be great if we do. Obviously, she couldn't make it today. Actually, I think I do remember her saying that she couldn't do Sunday this weekend. Actually, I think she did. She did say that. But I couldn't do Saturday. So, So, fantastic. Well, guys, I'm doing a gaming stream tomorrow night at 11 p.m. my time. That'll be, I think it'll be 6 p.m. East Coast. I'm picking up my Freeway Warrior books and doing the next Mad Max Choose Your Own Adventure. And then on Tuesday, which is Halloween, of course, I am doing a special episode on John Carpenter's The Thing, which I've also just done on Drinker's channel. If you're able to pop on that dark hour, you can. I'm sure you're probably doing Kid Candy Pumpkin.
Yeah. But you got, I mean, the guy you got for it is...
Yeah, I've got one. I think I've got fantastic. I've got one of your chaps coming on my channel for the first time.
He will always show up prepared. Don't worry.
Cool.
He's very good.
I think I've got Tomby coming on. I got a couple of people coming on, and possibly Gary Bolter from Outcast Australia will be coming on.
Nice.
So just tell us quickly what you've got coming up next and when.
Well, I did just release my Loki season 2 part 1 review, so it's the first half of season 2.
Can I ask, are you enjoying it? Because some people are telling me to watch it and say it's good, but I haven't yet.
I'm not really enjoying it. I mean, I haven't watched episode 4 yet. I'm gonna watch that 4, 5, and 6. But it just seems like it's dragging, and I'm just
Did you enjoy season 1?
Not really. But I had higher hopes for this because like I like Tom Hiddleston a lot.
And, so do I. I mean, he's a fantastic
and I've said this about the show. I said this about the show, that it's the problem isn't the people. It's like, they're all trying very hard. It's just they're not given much to work with. But my review is getting dragged over the coals by a lot of I got caught by the algorithm apparently, because people that aren't my subscribers were watching and not happy with what I had to say. So it is what it is, and you can't please everybody. But
no, man. Well, I mean, I know it's because speak to Retro Nerd Girl. She keeps asking me if I've watched it because she wants someone to come on and chat to her about it. But I haven't been watching it, so maybe I should put the two of you together. But I
mean, I'll reach out.
She's a big fan of it,
I mean, I even said in my review that this is all repairable stuff. Like, there's nothing that they've done wrong that can't be fixed. It's just the problem is, it's like, for instance, there's like 2 terrible things that can happen, and those are the only outcomes that they've explained. And I'm like, why, as the viewer, should I care? It's like, if this outcome is terrible and this outcome is terrible, why? Like, what am I supposed to be rooting for? It's like, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. But it could get better. There are ways around that, and but yeah, it is what it is. But I got that. And we're going to be doing, I guess, honestly, the next live stream I'm on with you for sure. I'm on for sure is with you. I haven't had any. I'm not scheduled for any other ones as of right now. So.
Okay, well, you will be doing my Christmas quiz, because unfortunately, if you're a friend of mine, that's not optional. So,
well, yeah, I know. I told you put me in there for sure.
I have. So that's on Sunday, the 17th of December. I have asked Drinker if he might pop in, even if it's just for a special guest round or something. But I've got about 6 other YouTubers that have committed already. So I think the plan is, what's the maximum number of people we can have on a StreamYard? Is it 8 or something like that?
No, I've seen more than that. I've seen upwards of 10 people on one stream.
Right.
So
well, I think we're going to have at least 4 aside, but the teams will be playing against each other and the chat. So if the chat answers the question before you two, neither of the teams gets the points. It's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, the chat is slightly behind, so you do have that window where you guys can answer first.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting thing. But yeah, I think I can look it up right now what the maximum for StreamYard is. Let's see.
Well, we'll find out nearer the time. But guys, that's it from me for tonight. Just want to thank Dark Hour for coming on again and watching this show that he's not particularly familiar with, but enjoying the process, I hope. And
it's fun.
So we'll be back next Saturday at 9 o'clock for Our Friends in the North Part 3, plus all the coming up next stuff, which is on the blurb that's scrolling past. You can go back and read that if you've missed it. Until then, don't forget to tell the people that you care about that you love them, and I'll see you again real soon.